Today we're here with Zach and we're going to work on some full body awareness and mobility in quadruped. So get on the floor. You can have a mat underneath you or be on carpet, and you are going to line up in quadruped. So your knees are going to be directly under your hips and your wrists are going to be under your shoulders. So once you've gotten into this position, we are going to line up our weights and spaces. So starting with the pelvis, tilt your pelvis into an anterior tilt, just like Zach is doing, and then tilt it the opposite way into a posterior tilt. Now, go between those ranges a couple of times and notice that as you anterior tilt, your ribs might also drop into the floor, and as you posterior tilt, your abdomen and ribs might cave up into an arch. So I want you to try to keep the ribs in a stable position and only anterior and posterior tilt the pelvis. You may experience way less range of motion since you're isolating the pelvis, and that's good. So once you've gone through your ranges of motion in the pelvis, find a neutral. So just find an area between your anterior and posterior tilt. This is your neutral pelvis. The next weight are your rib cage. We already talked about not letting the rib cage flare out and fall towards the ground, keeping the rib cage as if both sides of the rib cage were connected to each other and laced up together. The next weight is your shoulders. So just let the scapula fall towards each other, letting your upper body sink into the floor, and then pressing into the ground, push up and let the scapulas move away from each other. So just like we did with the pelvis, find this range in the shoulders. You're pressing up, maybe rounding the back a little bit, and then letting the scapula sink and concaving the back. So you're going to find your neutral in this position. So you're not pushing up too much, you're not sinking too far, you're finding the middle. And our last weight is the head. So imagine the neck is long, just like you are a baby kitty and your mama cat is picking you up from the back of the neck. Energy is going out the top of the head and the neck is long. So we lined up our weights, and now we're going to line up our spaces. So take a deep inhale and let the belly drop to the ground, filling up with air, and then as you exhale, pull the belly button up towards the spine. So you don't want your spine to be affected by this movement. You just want to see if you can use gravity to let your belly fill up towards the floor, getting the full breaths with the diaphragm. And then as you exhale, belly button comes up towards the spine without moving your neutral weights. Now we found our neutral alignment, and this might just be in and of itself a good awareness, a good stability challenge for you. We can add a little bit of movement in here if we go into the yoga cat-cow. So posterior tilt and move all of your weights in a curved position, and then anterior tilt and cow. So curving, arching the spine in a cat, just like a cat is scared, arching its back, and then the opposite, a cow, letting your belly drop towards the floor. Good. So notice how the spine is moving as one. This is good, and this is good mobility for the spine. We can get even more specific with this by imagining this cat-cow initiated from the pelvis. So start with the pelvic posterior tilt and let it be a wave rolling up the rest of your spine. And then anterior tilt just in the pelvis and reverse that wave down. And again, movement happening initiated by the pelvis adds a little bit more sophistication and specificity in your movements. Do a couple more of these. If you don't really feel the isolation of the pelvis, just keep working on it. It will take time to develop this possibly new motor pattern in your brain. Good. Now you're going to find yourself in a neutral position again, and we are going to do some rocking. So we will start the rocking by anterior tilting the pelvis and then sending the pelvis back to the heels. Good. And then coming back to with the weight on the hands. So you're sending the pelvis back and trying to keep the pelvis in an anterior/neutral position as you go back. A lot of the times, if you don't have this pelvic mobility in the hips, as you go back, the pelvis will curve into a posterior tilt. And we want to keep the pelvis initiated, anterior tilted, and then a neutral as we send our hips back. So you can do this really as many times as you need, trying to keep your other weights, the rib cage, the shoulders, the head, still in that neutral, and you're only moving the pelvis. And find yourself back in neutral. And that is our cat-cow and rocking variation in quadruped.